Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of True Believers here on the Fandom Podcast Network with our continuing coverage of Daredevil Born Again with this week's episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. So I can't do the episode alone. I mean, we're going to be some art critics this week because we're talking about art. It might be a little bit of a deviant art, but it's still art. So I brought in a top-notch art critic from the law firm of Wagner, Reitzel, and Cat. Cat is on another assignment this week. He had to be in court. Ugly thing with Daredevil and Deadpool and some weird stuff. We don't want to go into it. You're better off not knowing. But I did bring in the man who is in charge of our art department, the one and only Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
What is up? Boy, can you imagine Daredevil and Deadpool of the MCU era working together and talking? How would that go? You know,
I'm thinking it would end with Daredevil punching out Deadpool, and there'd be a lot of blood, but nobody can tell because they both wear red.
Good to be back for some True Believers. I'm excited to talk about this episode.
And this is the True Believers podcast on the Fandom Podcast Network, where we cover everything that's happening in Marvel and the MCU. And it's an exciting time. Daredevil marches on, and Kevin, we're only a few weeks away from Thunderbolts.
I'm excited for that. I can't wait.
But we are here talking mainly about Daredevil Born Again, episode 7. We only got 2 left after this one, Kevin. It's been flying by for season 1.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I'm liking how edgy that this show is. It's really, really cool.
And of course, you're watching on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. If you're watching the video version, if you're listening to the audio version, we appreciate that as well, whether you're listening to it on our Podbean major website or any of the podcast catchers out there. And again, the Fandom Podcast Network, where we try to feed your ears with some really good podcasts. And of course, too, if you want to find those podcasts, if you're watching YouTube right now, scan the QR code that's on the screen. It'll take you to our main page at fpnet.podbean.com, where you can find all the great podcasts of the Fandom Podcast Network and, have a little fun. Check out some Highlander, check out some Culture Clash, fall through the time warp. Maybe you find a little something to watch on Couch Potato Theater.
Look, I did it. It went up on my app, on my phone right there. Check it out.
There you go. we love it around here.
I had to make sure it still worked.
And of course, we are covering Daredevil Born Again. This is going to be a spoiler reaction show. So you know what that means. Spoiler alert time, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be spoiling the heck out of the latest episode of Daredevil. So, guys, if you have not watched the latest episode of Daredevil Born Again, go watch it, come back, join us on YouTube, hit pause on your podcast, go watch Born Again, and come back and hear our thoughts on what we saw this week on Daredevil Born Again. The march continues. Again, I love all of these posters, Kevin. Disney and Marvel did a phenomenal job with the marketing of this. And of course, we have been covering the whole series, so you can go back from the first 2 episodes dropping, episode 3, episode 4, and of course the double drop of last week with episode 5, With Interest, and episode 6, Excessive Force. And of course this week we have back to one episode, Daredevil Born Again, episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. Now, again, final warning, spoiler alert. We have to do this because both Tony and Cap get upset if we don't mention them twice in the episode. So, guys, we're going to get into it. And just a reminder, this is a MCU podcast, which means we do things in phases around here. So we are about to let off a little Tesseract energy and get into phase 1, which is going to be, of course, our plot description. Kevin, is it charged up? Is it ready?
It is ready, baby. The Tesseract is ready.
Let's do it. Mr. Reitzel, would you care to get into our plot description?
Yes. So I just want to read off the rest of the phases here so that people know what's coming up. So phase 1, we got the plot description, a reaction, the cast comments. So phase 2, we have the trivia and Easter eggs and some cameos, if any. Plot 3, we dive deep into plot analysis and any ties to the MCU comics, any article reviews. And then we're going to wrap up phase 4 with our final thoughts and if we have any predictions as well. So yeah. So we're going to start with phase 1 here, the plot description for episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. The police investigate Muse's lair and suspects of the young man with a troubled past named Bastion Cooper, otherwise known as the murder room. Is that what she called it?
Yeah.
Murder basement? Yeah. Named Bastion Cooper, which Kim reports to Fisk, who is also aware of Daredevil's reappearance. Bastion, a patient of Glenn, thanks her for helping him embracing his true identity, with Glenn realizing he is Muse. Bastion knocks Glenn unconscious and ties her to a chair. Murdock and the AVTF separately find drawings of Glenn in Muse's lair, with Murdock arriving to Glenn's apartment as Daredevil in time to rescue her from the Muse. As the two fight and the AVFT prepare to enter the apartment, Glenn fatally shoots Muse before fainting. Murdock manages to stabilize Glenn before the AVTF arrives. Fisk takes the opportunity to take credit for stopping Muse's crimes and publicly declares that the AVTF, that is the, what does that stand for again, Kyle? The something
vigilante team, or
it's the anti-vigilante task force. That's what it is. Yeah. Fisk takes the opportunity to take credit for stopping Muse's crimes and publicly declares that the AVTF as the responsible heroes. Meanwhile, Blake warns BB about consequences if she does not remove the mention of Daredevil's involvement in her scene on her blog. A recovering Glenn tells Murdock that she heard Daredevil say her name. Vanessa lures Luca to a trap where he tries to kill Fisk before Buck Cashman shoots Luca in the head. Dun, dun, dun. Straight up mob style there, Kyle. That's some mob action.
We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But Kevin, I want your instant reaction to what you saw in this week's episode.
So this was a great follow-up episode to the last one here. And, it's funny is I got my wife to watch the last two episodes. And she was like, oh, wait a minute. She was kind of thinking that Cashman might've been, Muse. And then like she went back on it. And then we found out who Muse was. I was surprised how it ended. Like we weren't going to see more Muse basically because he was killed. But I think in looking back on the bigger picture there is they wanted to pick a villain out of the comics, of course, that they could use. And this whole series is not necessarily about Muse because the main villain is obviously, Fisk, Kingpin, and it was kind of cool to see some of the Kingpin murals in some of the scenes and such. I was wondering if we're going to get anything with the Swordsman, but no, not yet. Or with the Punisher, no, not yet. But this was all about.
Froze up on me just a little bit here.
Oh, can you hear me? Am I freezing up? I can hear me.
You froze up again. So repeat your thought there, Kevin.
Okay, with the murals and the killing of Muse, this is more about Wilson Fisk being the mayor, controlling both the narrative in front of the camera and then the narrative behind the camera and all. He still does not want to give up power of the underworld. And as we saw Luca try to do, he wanted to go back, he wanted changes. He liked when Wilson's wife was running things and stuff like that. And so we saw what happened there. And I got a little bit more I want to ask about that later. But I thought it was a cool way of saying, okay, look, this was about not necessarily catching and killing Muse. It was about getting this task force together. So the bigger picture is Daredevil and the other, vigilantes that are out there, because you saw the look on Wilson's face when he heard about Daredevil being active again. And so I thought that was really interesting to see that. And, and then the mob ties kind of creeping up again. And, I did. I kind of wanted to see more Muse, but then I kind of see why they didn't. What about you, Kyle? What was your first impression?
I very much liked the episode. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Muse factor in one of our later phases too. So don't worry. We're going to dive deeper into that. I thought it was a very good episode. What I'm liked about this episode too is we're seeing the effects of Matt becoming Daredevil again and Wilson Fisk realizing he still needs to be in control of his underground too. And we're seeing those things happen, and we're seeing how it affects not only those two people, but the people around them. Because you see issues with Matt and his girlfriend, you see things happening with Fisk and Vanessa, and you're seeing the games. And that's one of the things I love about this series is this is a chess series. You got two people who are playing chess. And they're both going through this born again thing. And in Wilson's case, as the Kingpin and as the mayor, he's starting to use things he would do as the Kingpin, being the mayor.
Right.
But
Yeah.
one of the things that really stood out for me this episode was, and I think it was very reflective of what's going on in our world today, is obviously Daredevil takes down Muse, the Doctor shoots and kills him, but Fisk uses the opportunity to give credit to the AVT and make them more in the public eye, and I think that's going to be very
in a positive light too, which gives them power. You know, and acceptability and maybe deniability for bad stuff and stuff. But I did have a quick question. Is Daniel Blake, played by Michael Gandolfini, you know, he's basically in a way threatening BB to not give the details that Daredevil was involved with this, that it was all the task force. I kind of get the feeling he's doing a good job kind of following in his Sopranos father's footsteps, so to speak, where the way that he approached that situation was very gangster-like. And I like that, you know, he obviously is, you know, he believes in what Fisk is doing. And he obviously has an official role as a mayor's aide, but I kind of get the feeling that if he's not worried about getting his hands dirty either.
So let's talk about that, because I don't really have a place in notes to talk about that particular scene. And I think it's kind of important because I think he's on the death watch, because he's going to overstep his bounds again.
When you say the death watch, do you mean the vigilantes that have been killing people with the Punisher stuff?
No,
is that what you mean?
He's gonna piss the Kingpin off.
Oh, okay. Explain. What's death watch?
When I say he's on death watch, I mean he's literally a character I have on the clock.
Oh, that you expect to be dead soon. Gotcha. Okay.
Because
like Luca.
He's getting a little too big for his britches.
Yeah.
Shall we say? And I mean, there he is sitting at the desk drinking the fine scotch or bourbon, and she comes in and it's like, your boss wasn't gonna like that. Oh, I'm good. And he's playing little power plays that he's not telling Fisk about. And I think it's going to come back and bite him up in the ass, and he might not make it through season 1.
I see what you mean by death watch. You think he's gonna die soon. Gotcha.
The doomsday clock is on him. So
okay. I think he's good though. I gotta give it to Michael Gandolfini. He's doing a good job.
Yeah, in fact, let's talk about some things in the cast this week. You talked about Michael Gandolfini. He's been phenomenal. Anything in this week's with the cast that stood out for you?
Actually, I like the girl that plays Detective Angie Kim, the one that's kind of reporting directly to Wilson Fisk, because her actress's name is Rubio Keon. I like her. I think she's cool. Hunter Dune, who played Muse. I wish we could have got more, so he could have cooked more. We'll talk more about that later. But I thought he was good for what he was. I like Cherry a lot, by the way. Clark Johnson.
He's very good.
I hope we keep seeing more of him. I hope he doesn't get killed off. I really like him. Dude, loving Vanessa Fisk's character played by Eilert Zurer. She was really good in this, and we'll touch base on some questions I have regarding her actions in this film, or in this episode. Sorry.
Well, with that, guys, it's time to power up the Tesseract again and move on into phase 2, where we got some trivia and some Easter eggs and a little bit more interesting discussions. Again, thank you for joining the True Believers podcast as we discuss Daredevil Born Again, episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. And I got some trivia this week, Kevin. Last week was a little low on the trivia, but this week I found some interesting things that tie into the comics and a few other things. So let's dive into some of that Marvel trivia. And first up, Kevin, we get confirmation. Buck's MCU history and comics connections confirmed. Buck Cashman, aka Bullet, in the Marvel comics. Mayor Fisk also confirms he brought Buck to his administration from his other life. This does confirm that Buck Cashman indeed has a darker criminal past, mirroring his comics history as the Daredevil villain better known as Bullet. That said, Buck is very much Fisk's replacement of Wesley, the Kingpin's right-hand man from the original Netflix series, who was killed by Karen Page in Daredevil season 1, and he is cold-blooded. He is.
Was the character of Bullet? Did he have his own little cool, Marvel costume, or was he more like, what was his deal?
Well, he was a former government agent, and he was assigned to the United States by a United States Army general in the comics to Wilson Fisk to participate in a scheme against the Environmental Protection Organization. He impressed Fisk so much. Fisk kept him on as one of his lieutenants and right-hand men in the comics, and he was a big thorn in the side for Daredevil. In the comics, he was a little bit bigger, more physical, a little bit tougher, but what they've got is the right role for him. And
gotcha. Cool. I'm looking forward to him. Look more of him.
You mind diving into that Marvel trivia book, and let's talk a little bit about the next piece of trivia, Kevin.
All right, number 2, Muse's real name, a big change from the comics. Muse's real name is revealed to be Bastion Cooper, a disturbed young man who is involuntarily committed multiple times by his parents. This is a notable deviation from the comics. Muse, who is on the page, was a superpowered inhuman with a secret identity and past that was intentionally left a mystery by Marvel Comics. That said, Bastion Cooper's costume and mask as Muse, his dark artistic skills, and his disturbing preference for using his victim's blood to paint the remains paint to remain the same as what we've seen from the original comics. I was kind of wondering what the deal was, Kyle, because obviously when we see the first fight between him and Daredevil, he has some type of like martial arts skills, and then that gets mentioned in the therapy session with the therapist, and then we find out that he did Taekwondo, and then that it looks like he killed his teacher.
Yeah, they mentioned he was like learning from one of the like best in the world within the MCU. And I know we're going to talk about Muse a little bit more later when we get to our next phase, but I just want to say this. I think this is one of the things that the MCU has done very well throughout its history. There's certain aspects with certain characters that maybe you can't play up as much on in the quote unquote real movie verse per se. Mm-hmm. And I think what they did here with Muse in this aspect of it works much better for the character than trying to tell the story of what Muse was in the Marvel comics. And I think it plays a bigger part to the plan they have.
It seems the look that they have and the way that he, is a serial killer is pretty good transition from the comics, right?
Yeah, all that aspect came over great, but I think they humanized it just enough for the people who maybe aren't the huge comic book fans, but just watch the MCU to understand what's going on with this character. And I think that's one of the things Marvel is very good at. But Kevin, I know you're a big mob movie fan, and I really read the next piece of trivia.
So Bamonte's, a real restaurant with historic mob ties. The end of Daredevil Born Again Episode 7 sees Mayor Fisk eating dinner at Bamonte's in New York. Notably, Bamonte's is a real restaurant in Brooklyn, one of the oldest Italian restaurants in the city with historic ties to a real-life mob and the Five Families. As such, it's rather fitting that this is where Fisk sets up a trap and has Luca killed, who had tried to ally with Vanessa to kill Fisk himself.
I like the fact we're getting that New York mob history into this. I think that's very cool. Nice little touch, a little piece of trivia there.
So I have a question about Luca's death. I don't know if it's okay to bring up now during this trivia because this is where it happened, or do you have this later in the notes about talking about?
You can bring it up now. Luca's death will come up again, but you can bring your question up now.
Okay, so we see earlier in the episode where Luca has a clandestine meeting with Vanessa, right? Mm-hmm. And how he basically says, and I'm paraphrasing here, look, we are not earning anymore as much as we were when you were in charge, and it's time for a change, right? So then what we see play out is that Vanessa sends a text saying he's eating alone at the restaurant, this restaurant here. And then you see what appears to have Wilson eating alone, as said in the text, and Luca comes up behind him and he's getting ready to shoot him. But instead we see Cashman, aka Bullet, hiding in the shadows just beyond and then shoots him first. So my question to you is Vanessa working with her husband against Luca here, or is this a failed attempt? I mean, because I get the feeling that they're strong. They're working together to keep the underworld together, Vanessa. And so I think they're working together, right?
I think that's very open to speculation, and I'm going to hold off on giving you a full answer because we are going to talk about Vanessa and Fisk here.
Okay, cool. I want to leave it. I'll leave it hanging then because I don't know if anyone else was wondering that.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and it is something people are talking about. But let's get on to the next piece of trivia that I've got here, which is Death of Muse, I'm the Story. Heather Glenn ultimately kills Muse in Daredevil Born Again, episode 7. In the comics, Muse wasn't defeated by Daredevil either. He was instead killed by the vigilante known as Blindspot, who was possessed by the dark supernatural being known as Beast of the Hand. That said, both cases saw Muse sharing similar sentiments about how badly he wanted to be seen and recognized by the public right before his demise cut his story short. So again, Marvel using ideas from stories, but keeping it more humanized and a little bit more grounded, especially in a series like Daredevil.
I have to bring this up now before I forget, Kyle, because I thought of you in a scene of one of the shots of Muse's mural where it showed, and you mentioned this specifically about how the Kingpin is wearing, I think it was maybe in a trivia, how he's wearing mostly dark suits and stuff as mayor. And we're wondering if he's going to get back into the white suit. And that's that one mural that showed Kingpin, and it says Kingpin in white suit and in black suit, especially since we had the thing from the last episode where his black suit rips, and doesn't quite fit.
Yeah. So just interesting. They're doing so many interesting things with this show. But next up, we've talked about this before, Kevin, where this show is also really bringing in a lot of things that are happening in the real world and incorporating it in. And in this case, the thin, dark line mirroring real life controversy. Wanting his new anti-vigilante task force to find Muse and potentially take down Daredevil in the process, Fisk tells Detective Pal and his fellow officers that they are the thin, dark line tasked with protecting New York City. This connects to the controversial thin blue line flag and sentiments seen in real life. While originally intended to symbolize support for law enforcement, the thin blue line flag and connected symbols like the Punisher's skull logo have been banned by various police departments thanks to certain groups who've misused the flag to represent various problematic views. Now, I know a little bit about the thin blue line with some of my family and stuff like that. The original concept of the thin blue line was actually to pay tribute to officers who have fallen.
Right.
And
yeah.
It's been taken over by groups and things like that and warped, and because of that, things happened. But again, the imagery and things that they're talking about in this series, Kevin, and reflecting things that are happening in our world. And what I like about it is they're not necessarily hitting you over the head with it and trying to make a point. They're very subtle about it to make you have conversation about it.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's thought-provoking. That's what's good about this series.
We do have a few Easter eggs too, and a lot of it, Kevin, is some Netflix connections. We've talked about how the show has done such a phenomenal job of tying into the original Netflix series, and I really think this episode did it so amazingly. I've got a few things here. Matt's cross necklace given to him by Sister Maggie, shown cleaning up in the shower after his first battle with Muse in the subway tunnels. Matt Murdock is wearing a crucifix around his neck. Not only does this connect to his established Catholic faith, but is more than likely the same crucifix necklace given to him by his mother in Netflix Daredevil season 3. So I found that interesting. But Kevin, when Daredevil took down Kingpin, he really messed him up. You want to tell people about this little Easter egg?
Yeah. So, quote, 10 years of business infrastructure, Kingpin's original empire. This confirms that following his so-called unjust arrest, in quotations, Daredevil took down the Kingpin's entire business infrastructure that he had taken 10 years to build. Fisk's arrest occurs at the end of Daredevil season 3. However, it seems Murdock didn't stop there, systematically going after every part of Fisk's operations and those who worked for him, forcing Fisk to rebuild a new empire from the ground up in the years that followed. In Daredevil season 1, it was established that Fisk's first empire was built around Union Allied, a construction company he created to rebuild Hell's Kitchen after the Battle of New York in 2012's Avengers. In truth, Union Allied served as a cover and money launderer apparatus for Fisk and his allies' criminal activities. However, shows like Hawkeye and Echo have confirmed that Fisk and his wife Vanessa started rebuilding rather quickly, working with various gangs like the Tracksuit Mafia and those seen in Daredevil Born Again itself. Kyle, I just got to say this real quick, and I don't know if I mentioned it to you earlier, but I was mentioning it to my wife. This is a perfect example of what we were kind of leery about when this series Born Again was being announced, that they were going to kind of like rewrite history or kind of forget other stuff that happened. They haven't done any of that. They've even incorporated it into the current MCU with little trinkets here and there, and I think that's fantastic.
Oh, and come on, Kevin, we all know you're a huge fan of the Tracksuit Mafia.
Yes, where can I get one of those?
Well, the final really Netflix tie here, and I found this one to be very interesting, and I want to ask you something about this once I read this statement. A whole other life is seen in Netflix original Daredevil series. During his conversation with Heather Glenn, Matt refers to the life he once had working with Foggy Nelson and Karen Page, and subtextually his old life as the devil of Hell's Kitchen, connecting to all of the events seen in the original Daredevil series on Netflix.
See what I mean?
Now, yeah, but I want to ask you this, Kevin, because I was thinking about this when I was doing the notes. One of the things that I find very interesting and very well done, even though they are having all these connections to the original series, it really does have a different feel and a different feel to the story. In like, it is almost a whole new life for Matt Murdock in this series too. And I really think this is actually a very powerful thing, and again shows the quality of writing where they're making these connections, still giving you the feel of that Daredevil show, but it really feels like it's a different direction for Daredevil too.
Yeah, it is. And you got both sides of the coin with Daredevil and Wilson Fisk kind of rebuilding and retooling themselves, and that the now more than ever, depending on who you're looking at and rooting for, they both need to return to their old ways, so to speak, to fight for what they believe in. And I'm just so happy that they haven't stepped on any of the Netflix stuff right now and said that's not what happened there, to even with Foggy's death in the beginning of this Born Again series and revisiting that.
Yeah. Kevin, the next piece of trivia, I actually put this in here just for you, and I think you'll understand why when you read it.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. No, I got it here. Daredevil by Daylight, a pretty rare MCU sight. See what you did there. Daredevil's final fight with Muse takes place in Heather Glenn's office in daylight. As such, Matt Murdock wearing his suit when it's still light out is a pretty rare thing to see in the MCU. The only other time it's happened is when Man Without Fear briefly shows up in the season finale of She-Hulk Attorney at Law, appearing after the danger had passed, thanks to Jennifer Walters' major breaking of the fourth wall and going full meta. Yes, friends, that is a reference to one of my biggest pet peeves in movie and TV history, is when movies like to shoot stuff in really bad, dark lit situations and scenarios where they chintz out on CG and it's hard to see stuff. We get a full-on daylight here. And by the way, Kyle, this picture of that you have up here of Matt as Daredevil here, and he's still rocking the beard. And my wife was watching this going, wait, you can see that he's got a beard. Won't that give him away?
I'm glad you just mentioned that, and credit to the lovely Aaron. I was having a conversation with that about my roommate. If you're going to wear a costume like this, shave your beard, especially if you're going to go rescue your girlfriend, because if she reaches up and feels your beard and your jawline, she's going to recognize you.
That's funny.
So, okay, guys. Well, it is time to enter the next phase of this episode. So let's power up that Tesseract one more time and shift into phase 3. That's right. We are still talking Daredevil Born Again, episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. And it's time to get into some of our finer plot points for this episode. And Kevin,
phase 3, woohoo.
The first thing I want to get into, we've talked about this several times already in this episode, but I want to get in a little deeper here because I think there's a little bit more meat to chew on this bone. Muse, we barely got to know you. Muse is killed in this episode to the shock of many, as he's been getting a long buildup only to be taken out so quickly. Was this the right choice? Using this character as a pawn to move the pieces on the board, or should he have stuck around longer? Or do we think that perhaps they might have someone take up the mantle or be a copycat killer? So, Kevin, my question to you is, did they kill Muse off too quick? Do you think we will see a new version of Muse before it's all said and done?
No, I think he's dead and gone. And Muse was brought in to kind of set up the bigger threat, which is Wilson Fisk and his anti-vigilante task force, because now Wilson Fisk has an army to battle against the vigilantes here that he hates, and specifically Daredevil, because Daredevil tore down his entire empire from inside out. And for fans of the comic version of this, I'm sure they're like, oh man, why'd you kill him off? And it was all set up, all the creepy stuff and the blood and all of the murals from around the city. But the bigger threat here is what's going on in front of the scenes with him as mayor, Wilson Fisk, and behind the scenes, and him keeping what's his name, locked up as a prisoner, and now having to deal with the mob stuff, what was going on, and yeah. So I'm not disappointed. Was I surprised a little bit? Yeah, that he killed him off so quickly. What about you?
I would have liked to see Muse stick around a little bit longer. I think it was a very interesting character. They could have done a little bit more with him. I think how they used him, though, and using his death was very smart within the series, and it did what it needed to do, was give Fisk a political move to empower his task force and make things move forward there. But I really think they could have done a little bit more with Muse, made him a little bit more terrifying, played this story out just a little bit longer. I get it. We only have 9 episodes in season 1. Season 2 is filming right now. We won't see that till 2026. But I would have liked to. I think the Muse character is very intriguing, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of him maybe getting very injured and escaping. Maybe we think he's dead, not obviously dead, where Fisk claims, okay, we took him out, but maybe he's not quite there yet. As they once said in a famous Monty Python movie, I'm not dead yet. But I think that to me would have been the way to go.
Or Miracle Max, he's just mostly dead.
Yeah. True love. But I'll be curious to see if we see another person take up the mantle somewhere down the line. I think that's very possible, or a copycat killer, something along those lines. If they wanted to do that story, I think they could. It's there. We'll see what they do with that. But that's going to bring us to our next topic, Kevin, and this is the big one for me in this episode. Wilson Fisk has to deal with an attempt to kill him. Kingpin and Vanessa's relationship, is it still rocky? This is maybe the biggest question of the episode. Daredevil Born Again is making the most of Eyelet Zura's Vanessa, who took over Fisk's criminal empire when he was away and was very successful. Fisk and Vanessa's relationship is complicated, to say the least, but it is rooted in deep love and hurt feelings. Episode 7 initially had Vanessa seemingly sending Luca to kill Fisk, but by the end, it seems like she could have alerted the Kingpin. That's the question everybody's asking, and you asked it earlier in the episode, Kevin. So if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of address this a little bit.
I've been waiting for this. Come on.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are speculating she worked with Wilson to set up Luca because he was a problem.
Right.
But I do think they've left it open enough to wonder, is Vanessa trying to make a power play here? Is she so frustrated with Wilson and his journey as mayor when she feels like they're losing power in the underworld? Plus, she lost a lot of power through all of this. People get mad with power sometimes. However, it does seem like Vanessa, kind of in the prior episode, felt more of an attraction and kind of rebonded with Wilson when she saw Wilson doing more things with the underground and what he did with Luca initially. I think this is the biggest question, and I think, kind of looking ahead to our final phase, but I'm just going to throw this out here now. I really think next episode is going to deal with this, because I love the aspect of right after Luca is killed. Fisk says, "Well, somebody call my wife and see if she wants me to bring her home this particular meal." And the way he says it and the way D'Onofrio delivers that line, you could look at it either way. Like, okay, I'm just going to bring my wife home a meal, or he's having somebody make the call to say, "You didn't get me." And I think it could be. I love how they have it where it could be interpreted either way as it stands right now.
I hope they're still working together. I hope she tipped him off and they set Luca up, because when there's Luca, if you look at it this way, both Luca in front of Wilson in his own office, and Luca with the little secret meeting with Vanessa in that alleyway or whatever it was, in not so many words, he basically asked them both, why is he doing this? Why is he running for mayor? And then Luca's obviously upset that they're not earning like they used to with their criminal activities, like when Wilson was out of the picture and she was still running things, And even though they're going through the therapy thing, which I think, which is kind of, it's very James Gandolfini in Sopranos, because he went to therapy but didn't tell anyone. I like that there's this dichotomy here between their past, but they're still. I mean, if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have anything at all, basically, if you think about it. And so I think he respects that, and I think he trusts her for that. And I find it more interesting that they're working together on this empire than just having a kingpin only situation. I don't know. What do you think?
I think, ladies and gentlemen, what Kevin really wants is he wants Wilson and Vanessa, a Hallmark mobster love story.
You got me. I'd watch the hell out of that. Tell me that right now.
I think they're working together. I do think they are working together, but I think it's still a little bit strained, and it could go either way depending on some things. I wouldn't be surprised if Vanessa initially didn't set this up with maybe the thought to take out Wilson, and then had second thoughts and realized that she'd be better off setting up and getting rid of the Luca problem, because you always have these underlings that want to make a power play.
I have to interrupt you real quick, Kyle, because I have that scene playing right now on my television where she sends the text to Luca, giving the address of the restaurant and saying he's alone. The look on her face could almost be interpreted like, yeah, let's let him kill my husband and I'll be good with that. Because the look on her face was very satisfying when she sends that, right after she sends send on it. Would she have that same look if she knew that she was tipping off her husband so Luca could get killed and get Luca out of the way? So yeah, it can be interpreted both ways. The next episode's going to tell.
Well, let me put it this way. I think Vanessa was in the mindset of, I win either way.
Yeah.
So, So coming soon to the Hallmark Channel, ladies and gentlemen, Wilson and Vanessa. Our last topic for Phase 3. What is next from Matt and Daredevil? The Kingpin uses Daredevil stopping Muse in his death to his political advantage, giving his task force the credit for taking him down. Will this give more power to the task force to hunt Daredevil within the public eye? Also, are we seeing the effects of returning to his costume? Are those effects hitting Matt harder in his relationships? And are we headed back to a very dark time for Matt and Daredevil? And I think we are, Kevin. I think you're seeing the same thing that kind of happened in the earlier seasons of Netflix, where Matt became so obsessed with Daredevil, he started pushing everybody away. And this is typical in the comics. His role as Daredevil tends to not be healthy for him in relationships and healthy for his mindset. And I think we're starting to see it here now. Even when he's hitting Muse, you can see it. He's losing control in a way. He's screaming again. And I think we're headed to, and I say this because I've actually seen a couple shots for next season where Daredevil's in his black costume. We're headed to a very dark time for Matt and Daredevil. I think that will be triggered by the events that happen in these next few episodes.
Well, he's definitely heading down a dark path with that beard that's going to give him away, So it's interesting. You can kind of see some friction going on with him and his girlfriend. She's asking him, like, why does he have the bruises? And, and you can tell he's not being, she can tell, and that he's not being very forthright about what he's really up to and stuff. So, it's, he's not built to have a relationship, I guess. But, what's interesting about Matt, though, is that I love the fact that we're still getting a lot of lawyer stuff with him, and we see that a little bit as well in this. And of course, him and Cherry got pissed off that he presented himself as Daredevil again.
Another relationship being affected by his role as Daredevil.
And then his co-counsel, the other lady, I'm forgetting her name, hit up Cherry saying, why are you guys hiding secrets from me when we should all be a team? And she was getting pissed off at Cherry. So that was a nice little thing to see, But him diving back into the Daredevil stuff is gonna be a fun thing. But I gotta be honest with you, I'm more curious about what's happened with Wilson and Vanessa. I can't wait to see the next episode regarding that.
Well, and I think that's a good point. It's time to burn off a last of that Tesseract energy for this episode and get into Phase 4. So as we get into our final phase here, we're talking about Daredevil Born Again. We've spoiled the hell out of the show. Hopefully you've enjoyed what we've talked about. But this is phase 4, where we kind of give our final thoughts on the episode and maybe some predictions of what we could see based off of what we see now through Daredevil Born Again. Kevin, so I want to start with you. Give me your final thoughts on this episode and tell me what you think we might see as we head into the final 2 episodes, and next week being the penultimate episode of season 1 of Daredevil Born Again.
This episode was a good episode. It was paced well. It gave you a lot to chew on, with a good setup from the previous episode, Excessive Force. And you could just, I got to tell you, I really like watching Vincent D'Onofrio respond with certain looks to things that he does not like and he doesn't say out loud. And it's a very mobster thing to do, is never tell anyone what you're really thinking. You could tell from a couple episodes ago he was planning Luca's death one way or another, and that came to fruition. And I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in the next episode. I'm hoping that Vanessa and Wilson come together, saying, he goes like, "Thanks for the tip, and let's see what we can do to finally take control." And then I was reminded of that charity benefit thing that he ran, where we do see what's his name from
Swordsman.
Swordsman, Duquesne.
Yeah, Jack Duquesne.
Yeah. There was that woman that came up to Wilson, basically saying, calling him out, saying, this is a front for your whatever dirty stuff that you're doing. It's not in so many words that she was saying. She doesn't trust him at all, and he's just sitting there, just kind of like, not giving anything away, and just letting brush over his shoulder. So I'm really, really enjoying Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, and how the next episode is going to dive into the mob side of things, while he's going to be using his task force. And you could say they could use, as they hold up the mask of Muse, are they gonna push the narrative that Muse is a vigilante, and then use the public opinion against Daredevil and make Daredevil the public enemy number 1? That's what I'm kind of wondering, the angle that he's going to be going with here, because now that he has a strike force under his thumb now, and his own personal hit squad if they want to, and how Daredevil is going to deal with that, it's going to be interesting.
All very good points. For me, my final thoughts on this episode, this might be the episode where we look back and go, this was the swing episode. This is the episode where we see the step into both of them fully embracing what they are again.
Yeah.
I think this episode, using Muse, really sets up the board for what's going to happen in these final 2 episodes. And that kind of leads me into my thoughts of next week's episode and maybe the final episode. I agree with you, Kevin. I think next week's episode is going to be all about Vanessa and Kingpin and the task force. I think we're going to see the effects of the task force getting credited with taking down Muse. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see the task force take out a couple of vigilantes. Maybe Jack Duquesne as the swordsman, maybe somebody else in episode 8.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
I think you're going to see what that empowerment did. I also think you're going to see the answer to the question we had for this week. Where do the Kingpin and Vanessa stand? I really think by the end of episode 8, he will put on the white jacket. That's my feeling. A lot of people think it'll be the last episode. I think it's going to be episode 8. I think he's going to go back to full Kingpin. He's going to be running the town like he's the Kingpin, and he's going to be running his business too.
Yeah, buddy.
On the Daredevil side of it, I think we're going to see Matt really start to lose his relationships and really go into this dark place. I think the episode is going to probably end with the task force finally tracking him down, which will lead into the final episode of the fight between Matt and the task force, where one of 2 things I think happens. I think they beat down Matt. I think he maybe gets away, but we see Matt kind of having to go fully born again as Daredevil. Maybe we even see the black costume by the end of this episode of Daredevil. This is the one thing, too, where I think this is where people are a little bit frustrated. I think people are disappointed we haven't seen more Frank Castle. And I think There's a chance we see Frank Castle in episode 9, but I'm not 100% betting on it. I think there's plans for Frank Castle to be in part 2, especially with the comeback of Daredevil fighting against the task force. Frank is not going to tolerate much longer these quote unquote fanboys, as he called them, doing things under his logo. He's just not.
The other thing too with Daredevil is that he may need Frank's help. And the reason why I say that is because now the cops are all under Wilson's control, because he has this task force that I believe has more power than any of the cops do. And I feel that when Matt tries to deal with what's going on with the mob or the task force, because I think the task force, we're going to see them get extra, because we haven't seen them get dirty yet. And I think they're going to get dirty next. Like what you mentioned, they might kill a vigilante. And I think that he can't stick to the legal aspect of things now, of getting arrest and jail time. I think things are going to get violent.
Well, and Fisk knows Matt is Daredevil. You don't think he's going to try to take down his alter ego? And what I mean is, I think Matt's going to become, by the end of this season 1, he's going to fully be Daredevil, and that's it. There will be no more Matt Murdock. Daredevil will exist because I think Kingpin's going to destroy Matt Murdock.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Like set him up or something, Yeah. So yeah,
I'm very much looking forward to what's going to happen. 2 episodes left. I can't believe we have to wait all the way till 2026 for season 2, but I get it. It's going to be a long wait in between. I'm sorry, this is the best Marvel show that they've done, going back from Netflix to now. I mean, I love Falcon and Winter Soldier. It was fun. I loved Hawkeye. It was fun, but this by far, and Luke Cage is great, but from start to finish, Daredevil has been the most consistent television show Marvel has done. And it's been amazing to watch. And I'm so glad we are covering it here on the Fandom Podcast Network and on the True Believers Podcast. And we want to thank everybody for joining us this week as we continue to discuss Daredevil Born Again. And of course, you can find True Believers on the Fandom Podcast Network as we cover everything that is happening with Daredevil Born Again. Every show will be a spoiler reaction show, just so you guys know. We're not going to pull our punches here with this show. We love this show. And again, True Believers is covering everything that's happening in the MCU, and there's a lot more happening later on this year. We got Thunderbolts around the corner. We got Fantastic Four later in the summer, and who knows what else Marvel's going to drop between now and then. And of course, the Fandom Podcast Network, we're covering all the things in fandom, whether it's current, retro, or maybe talking about some things that might be happening in the future. Kevin, I got to hit you up with this because you posted a very interesting photo on Blood of Kings today with a certain really big guy from Jack Reacher, and I just got to bring it up because it was a great photo, and it's got a lot of people speculating on something that might be coming with a certain Chad Stahelski Highlander movie, who he's going to be real busy too, because it sounds like he's coming back to Wick as well.
Yeah, we got John Wick 5 announced, and the rumor is that the Highlander reboot that Stahelski is going to be directing is supposed to start filming in May, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think to this particular actor we're talking about who's in Reacher, I could see him coming up in a Hulk movie as a heavy to fight the Hulk.
Yeah, I just finished Reacher season 3, and this guy was huge. You think Reacher's Alan Ritchson is big? This guy was bigger.
Yeah, he was. But we'll talk about that more when we get on other shows as we get more news on that. But I just had to bring that up because we haven't done a Culture Clash in a while because we've been covering Daredevil and got to give some love to our other shows around here because it is the Fandom Podcast Network, and you can find the Fandom Podcast Network all over the place. Of course, here on our YouTube channel. And again, we appreciate you watching on the YouTube channel. Please give us a like, subscribe, and share us out. We appreciate the support. Of course, too, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. We've got a great page there. We also have a great True Believers group on Facebook and groups for all of our wonderful shows. And of course, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network too by scanning the QR code on your screen. It'll take you right to our main homepage at fpnet.podbean.com, where you can find all of our shows and feed your ears. And of course, we are all over social media at FanPod Network on Twitter, at FanPod Network on Blue Sky. We are all over the place. We are having a lot of fun on Blue Sky, though. That's our latest addition to social media. And Kevin, where can people find you on social medias?
Well, you can find me on Blue Sky at Spartan Phoenix, and you can also find me on X, Instagram, Threads, Discord, and Letterboxd at Spartan_Phoenix. And of course, you can find me on Facebook and in the True Believers MCU Fandom Facebook group as well. If you have not joined, please do so.
And of course, you can find me. I'm Kyle Wagner on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at AKyleW, on Blue Sky at AKyleW, and on Threads and Instagram at AKyleFandom. And lastly, guys, too, we love you guys so much. We also love it when you support us. And please go check out our TeePublic store. Just search for Fandom Podcast Network or any of the shows on the network, and you can find the gear of the Fandom Podcast Network. You can see everything we got there up on the screen. We got t-shirts, we got hoodies, we got mugs, we got hats, we've got all kinds of stuff, phone cases, laptop cases. I think there's even backpacks maybe even now. TeePublic is always adding new gear there, and you can get our logos on it. And yeah, we get a little kickback here because Tesseract Energy ain't cheap, people. I'm just saying. But either way, we just appreciate the support, and we appreciate you wearing the gear of the Fandom Podcast Network. This has been the latest episode of True Believers, where we have been talking about Daredevil Born Again with the latest episode of Daredevil Born Again, episode 7, Art for Art's Sake. It has been a pleasure, Mr. Reitzel, getting your art reviews. I'm going to suggest, though, don't use any blood and epoxy mix in your future art givings. It's one, it washes off the hands very hard. It's hard to get off walls. It doesn't clean up well. You find something a little better, man. And just saying.
Yeah, that was too much effort for me even to consider, so no.
Exactly. It's hard to come by as well. But again, thank you everybody for listening. And as we like to say around here, Excelsior. And until next time, make ours marvel.